What is a brand audit? Why would you use it? What's in it? How much would you even charge? And do you know about the mild, medium, and spicy brand audit system? Well, my friend Cassy had all these same questions, and we had a call and we recorded it, and we thought this would be helpful to others. So why don't we go check out that call and see what all this brand audit stuff's all about? So, Cassy, you want to talk a little bit about brand audits? Tell me what's on your mind.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this a little bit more, like how can I offer this as a service to my clients? And then what all does this entail? Like what all should be audited? How is that process? Like these are big questions, like what works for you or what have you noticed to work or what have you seen out there?
Yeah, so let me go ahead and I actually prepped something for you.
Ooh,
And I'm going to go ahead and
thank you.
share my screen. Let's see how that all works. I'm also, in full disclosure, you can see my multi-camera setup going here. I'm like trying different things, so
It's awesome.
we'll see how good I am or I'm not. Cool. All right, are we seeing
The slide.
the
Yeah.
slide now? And
Yeah.
actually, why
There
don't
we
we
go.
try?
That's
Yeah, why don't we try this? Why don't we try to play a slideshow in a window? How does that work? Oh, so great.
look.
Keynote. And is that working on your screen?
Yeah,
Okay,
that works.
fantastic, cool. So this is my thoughts around brand audit, and I'll give you like how I'm thinking of it.
Okay.
But today, I prepped. We'll talk about what it is, why use them, what is in a brand audit. I'll give you some examples, and then you told me you wanted to know how much to charge, and if you
Yeah.
have any questions, we can rap about it.
Sweet. That's exactly everything I need.
Cool. So, what is it? What is a brand audit? And I think of it in a couple different ways. The first way is it's just a diagnostic. It's just this way to diagnose where a brand is at any given time, looking at different attributes, and we'll talk about that. It's a way to have a measurement. So I think that like branding is so hard sometimes because we don't know how to measure it. And sometimes it feels so touchy feely. It feels like,
Yeah.
mission, this, that. Like how do we actually measure it and measure it? And then it gives us a baseline. So which is really great when working with a client because we can say, okay, here's where we started, or here's what we are working with, and now here's where we ended up, or here's what we're going to try to get to. And
Yeah.
it also gives us this ability to, in that diagnostic area of things, it allows us to pinpoint what needs to be worked on, right? So I mentioned it gives us a baseline. I use brand audits in different ways. Like one way that I use a brand audit, and I'm going to show you an example, is as a lead magnet. So it becomes
Yes.
like this way to understand, like, hey, do I have a branding problem? Do I?
Yes. I started working on something like this. So, and that kind of led into the whole, okay, how can I make money off of this also?
Totally. And I'll show you an example of that. I also think of it in different, I have different kind of levels or intensity of brand audits to talk about. And it's a sales tool. So
Yeah.
as we go up the ladder a little bit, it becomes this way to take the customer on a journey of discovery, of like understand where the problem might show up. So for example, like I talk about this a lot, that no one's ever saying, hey, I have a brand strategy problem. And most people don't even say I have a branding problem. They say things like, I don't know what to put on my website. All my materials are inconsistent. We're not being recognized for who we are. People misunderstand us, those types of things. And so using it as a tool to say, well, those things that you're experiencing are showing up in your brand. For me, it's discovery. It really helps me to find the problems and to understand where things are potentially broken, and where
Yeah.
things are good. Also to confirm client assumptions. So I have so many clients that come to me that are like, that self-diagnose, that tell me what they know what they need. Well, I don't know that,
Yeah.
and sure you feel the same way, but
Oh,
most of the time, like they're not right, you know, or they're partially right, or
yeah.
what have you. Yeah,
Or they have the wrong solution to what their real problem is. Like they don't identify the real pain point.
absolutely. It's also a great way for us to like visually see the problem. So like if we're able to
Yeah.
map it, if we're able to present it, we can talk about that. Um, so what do we want to know in a brand audit? I want to know what's working. So I want to know what's working well for them. This isn't all about tearing down their brand. It's like, okay, like what attributes, which components of the brand are working, what's not working. So then we get to tear it down and say like, hey, uh, you know, that's not working. And then what could work? Like what, and this is about identifying opportunities for the brand to get better. And then ultimately, like, is this a brand problem that we can solve? So like what's really, then you and I were just talking about this before we started about really long engagements, you know, and like what if we got into this like really long engagement and then realized that like it's a problem that I can't really help solve, or you can't really help solve. I've had that unfortunately happen, because like early in my career I'd rush in and be super stoked that a client wanted to work with me. I'm like, I can help you. And then you get like into this massive engagement and you're like, ooh, like, I don't know, like if I can help you, you know, because it's like maybe I misdiagnosed the problem. So for me, this really sets us on a path of, hey, like, yeah, we have a mutually agreeable problem that I can help solve or not, you know, or it's even worth solving. Like sometimes I've done brand audits where there's just like little tweaks, and it's more like, take that brand audit and go tweak your brand. Like you don't need to do this like massive engagement. And as much as I'd like to work with the customer, as much as I'd like to have the business, if I can't help them a lot, I just want to see them be successful. So types of brand audits. So we were also talking about Chris Do prior to this recording. And I like to think of my audits in these three ways: mild, medium, and
Oh,
spicy. He talks about mild, medium, and
yes,
spicy
we
when
use
it comes to
stylescapes this way.
stylescapes. Yeah,
So
exactly.
interesting that you're thinking of brand audits this way. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. And so I'll tell you what, like, and to me, it's about level of intensity.
Okay.
And so to me, a mild brand audit is probably something that's like a self-diagnostic. This is your lead magnet. This is like your
Yeah.
5 to 10 minute worksheet where you
Mhm.
can check off a box. Hey, do I, you know, am I showing up inconsistent? Do we have values and beliefs that are shared by all? And you could say yes, no. You could say on a number continuum scale. And it's something that like a client can do really quick. I've actually done these with a client in the room and say, hey, fill out our diagnostics, see what you think. And it becomes this way for either for the client to understand like, hey, yeah, I do have a problem. And this is where it ends up. This is an example of one that we have. Happy to send this
Beautiful.
to you after, but
Awesome.
it's a
Thank
brand health
you.
audit. And these questions, you'll just see like we have them score 1 through 5. Our ideal customer is clear. We know who they are, what they care about, and what they identify with. You can see where that's leading, right? We are
Yeah.
able to clearly communicate who we are. We are able to clearly communicate why we exist. We're able to clearly communicate what we do. And they can just rank that 1 through 5 and then very quickly say, hey, I have an issue. So before we came up with these numbers, great way to quickly, that's to me, that's like a mild, easy audit, super simple.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's at the front end. I think you're thinking of something a little more complex.
Well, actually, this is really validating to see this for me because I started doing something that had about 19, 20 questions too, because I was thinking in terms of what do I provide for strategy and the value with brand strategy. So I was kind of thinking very similar questions to what you have. So that's really validating to me to see this and know, okay, I'm on the right path for
Yeah,
this.
and I would just think about the end, like, so the way we came up with this is just thinking about the end output of brand strategy and what type of questions you would ask to say either I do or do not
Yeah.
have those taken care of. So for
Yeah.
example, like the why one, we all work on our why. So it's like we have a why, we know how to articulate that, we, you know, things like that. So
Yeah.
pretty easy way to reverse engineer it, but you know, sometimes we
Yeah.
overcomplicate it because we're so like in it. At least I do. I'm an overcomplicator.
Me too.
Medium, a medium brand audit is one that I think is something I love. I think it's something that is a great sales tool, and I think is a great way to start an engagement. And so this is more of an in-depth type of audit. This is something that's 1 to 2 hours of work that you would do on the back end, maybe have an intake form for the client to say, hey, send me your brand touch points, send me everything you've worked on, some of your social channels, some of your website. It's a commitment, but a smaller commitment. And then we'll reflect back in an hour-and-a-half presentation to the client what's going on. And I think this is blocking. Oh, why did this not? Oh, there we go. For some reason. Oh, it's clicking because it wants to. So these are screenshots, and I'll go ahead and change the screen share from our brand audit. And what you get when we go through that is really 3 things. We want to talk about the pros and cons, like the strengths and weaknesses of your brand as it is, look at opportunities for improvement, and recommendations and actions to start, tweak, or keep doing. And so why this is great. This is a great first level engagement. We retail this out at $1,600. We'll sometimes discount if we are, that's a retail out. We'll sometimes discount if we want to get the client in and just prove our value. If I'm speaking, a lot of times I'll offer a fast action bonus on this of around $4.99 or something like that.
Okay.
Just to get people to think about it.
Yeah. Build that trust.
Build that trust. They can see, some people are just curious. They're like, do I have a brand problem? They think they might, but they're not ready to fully go through this really big process. Yeah. And I'm going to go ahead, and I think what kept coming up. Yeah, I wanted to bring this up. And so I'll go ahead and share this really quick. Okay, and so this is like our landing page for our brand audit. And you can go there, and it's, I thought I had written it for you, but you can see that here's the URL. It's just, Lee Page's thing, but it just kind of speaks to the client. Hey, something about your brand is it people that they have a hunch that like something's going on, but they're not sure. They're, and the idea of getting into a full branding project is like super. I was just talking with someone today, a friend of mine, and I was like, well, tell me what you think, and getting feedback. And he's like, it's super intimidated. It's a big lift, to like, even in like mentally, like you just think it's huge. This is a nice step. And we get in there and I just talk about the brand and hey, we get what's going on. It's complicated. Why not use a pro? This is what we love to do. This is what you're going to get, which I talked about. Here's how it works. We're just going to get all your touch points, your assets, your guidelines, and you're going to send it to us. And we're going to go ahead and give you a report back and walk you through what we're seeing. So again, I give you access to all that, no problem.
And really, thank you so much for sharing your pricing too, because I've, been talking to other service providers and like my pricing, I'm like, whoo, I need to double my rates or whatever. I'm way too low.
You are. And the other thing I will say is, I don't even know your rates, but you're low, right? And I am too. And so I always try to anchor high is an idea that I try to go with. Is this idea of anchoring high so that I have the luxury of going down. So if someone, if I'm speaking at an event and I want to get as a lead source and just want to meet a bunch of people, and this is what I love too. This is where I was talking about. We really get to see if it's a good fit too. Low on our side in terms of commitment, low on their side, and they, and we give a ton of value here, and they can go ahead and take this recommendation and implement themselves. And I'm more than happy with that if that's the kind of client they are, and they don't, and they don't want to go. Oh, here's the URL, so you can go ahead and hit that.
Cool, awesome.
Got too fancy with my slide transitions and putting this together. The other thing is, I'm gonna get rid of this. This is driving me crazy. So usually it's about 7 points. There's different ways to do this. We've played with 7 different areas, highlighting words, color, story, music, shape, sound, in the human aspect. So what we'll go through is we'll just look at their tagline, their typography. We'll look at their color palettes. We'll look at like what's going on with the stories they're telling. And we'll just do this in like a deck like this, just like one little headline. Hey, this is what we're seeing. Nothing like, just like, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is the fonts you're using. Do they have any music, shapes, sound, and like the human, like what kind of influencers are involved in your brand? The other way to do it is like, hey, focus on the logo, maybe palettes, typography. This is much more of a design kind of
Yeah.
like, but it helps people, brand problems, as you know, they manifest themselves in design or marketing problems. And
Yeah.
so it's taken me a long time because I love to nerd out about brand strategy. I love to talk about all the intricacies, but clients don't say it in those words. So
Yes.
talking about typography, tone and style of your video, maybe brand architecture, your messaging and your brand positioning. How are you showing up? Another way you could do it is through competition, and say like, hey, like what does the competition look like? But I'm really hesitant to get into that because it gets to become this like ugly onion, and we typically do that more in an actual strategic engagement.
Yeah.
And then here, these are literally the questions that I answer during any brand strategy engagement. We go in them a lot, but it's why do we exist? How do we do what we do, and how do we do it? Who do we serve? And so like, obviously this is one little bullet point, but this is like customer personas, customer journey mapping, all that. How are we different? What's our uniqueness? What's our personality? What are our beliefs and values? And ambition is literally kind of like, what's our vision for the future? So if I were doing a bigger audit, I might map it all back to this kind of stuff. And the deliverable is always like a PDF. It's like, a little bit of brand education, a little bit of this stuff, like with like, hey, here's your, literally just take, hey, this is your fee. It's on the nose. It's not on the nose. All your competitors are doing the same. Like, what do you want this to say about you, et cetera?
So is the 7-point audit done mostly with your team, like you're doing it, or are you kind of collaborating with them? Like, what's that look like?
So this medium version, typically it's an intake form asking for all their touch points. And then we'll just go, and primarily when I say we, a lot of times it's me, we'll go and we'll take it and we'll just start like, this is a good one, right? This is like the core of what we'll do. And so we'll say, hey, like we'll just put their logo up and we'll say, hey, and maybe this is where we'll go look at really quick other competitors and be like, you look exactly like all your competitors.
Yeah.
Or, hey, this logo, you say you want to be luxury, this logo looks a little down market. And maybe give like, but like, we're not going crazy on this, we're trying to give them value, but not do a ton of work. So maybe half the slide is other luxury logos saying like, look, this is kind of like, hey, you say you want to be happy, but you're using this dark gray and, puke yellow or something that doesn't really feel happy or whatever, typography, same thing. And like most clients, and we always take this for granted, like they just don't realize like type has like this, it's communicating so much and things like that. So we're going through that. Your messaging, you say you're friendly, but you come off like a robot. Like there's something incongruent here. And we'll talk a lot about incongruencies and things like that. And your positioning, you say you're known as being the safe brand, but you scare the hell out of me or whatever, right? Or like we might say like, hey, you said you're the safe brand. You are the safe brand. You are associating with that word safe. You feel safe. So that's good. Like, let's lean into that. So it might not all be like that.
So you gather that from having a conversation with them and maybe asking them specific questions, and then really observations. This is really like observational.
All high level observation. And we're not like solving any problems. It really is more like this diagnostic of this is what we see.
Yes.
And not spending a ton of time. And
yeah,
all that, everything we're getting is from the intake form on this one, as well as, spending about an hour or two of work, both doing research and cobbling it together for presentation.
Okay, cool.
Again, this is like a little more in depth. And then like, I don't really ever do a whole lot of this, but when I was thinking about this for our call, like this idea of like a spicy would just be like this idea of like doing massive deep research on the front end of an actual engagement. So it's a bigger commitment. It's like, so it's an audit, but it's not this like standalone thing. It's literally the front end of what we're going to do. And so thinking of big clients I've worked with where, we've flown all over the nation and we've interviewed key stakeholders and we've really set up this idea of a gap. Like, hey, you told me your brand is this, but this is what I'm hearing back from all our customers. You said you compete this way. Well, you might not be seeing it that like, so again, going back to all those things in the beginning of why we do a brand audit for measurement, baseline, and an agreement on a common starting point. But this becomes more of the foundation of, hey, we're going to tell you, we're going to do a diagnostic, tell you where we're starting from so that we all have a agreed upon starting point, and now we can move forward with the larger engagement.
Yeah, definitely.
You might do a SWOT here,
Mhm.
SWOT assessment. You might do, really diving into the history of the brand. Could be something, the backstory if they're a legacy brand or something like that, and all the baggage, that like sometimes we know brands have, if there's been like leadership change or like just big family business that maybe went private or something. I mean, I'm sorry,
So
public.
really it's a lot of like market research. So it's a little bit of, okay, so I see the medium audit to be more like you're observing and you're, recognizing the similarities or differences in who they say they are. And the spicy audit is more of other people's observations and you gathering and synthesizing that information.
Yeah, a lot
Kind
more.
of how I see it.
Yeah, totally. Get your hands dirty, getting like kind of like rubbing elbows with the brand, so to speak.
Yeah.
The medium is just more of this like, hey, this is what we're seeing, and this is where you have an opportunity. And I think a lot of these are also commiserate with both commitment level from the customer and or size of business. So a
Yeah.
smaller, one person business or a small business might want to do that diagnostic. Someone who's a little bit bigger and has $1,000 to just to kind of test the waters, they might want to do that. And then the spicy is someone who's like, look, we know we have an issue and we're used to this and we want to spend some money on it. Also, like, there's a lot of stakeholders, right? So like,
Yeah.
when I think about it, and I'm just thinking about this as we're talking this through, like the one I've done, the spicy audit, it's like when there's a lot of stakeholders, more traditional business CEOs and things like that, and they want to build a bit of a story prior to going in, and they're really worried too about like what's the word I'm looking for when you bring everyone together. I want to say, I'm like, consensus. They want to build a consensus amongst their leadership team, and so they want, they're kind of playing nice. They're playing politics. They're playing, or maybe politics is the wrong word. Maybe they're being, having diplomacy, and so they're saying, hey, we want to like have a finding prior and understand where we're starting from.
Yeah. So this would be done before like a big rebrand or refresh or campaign or whatever the diagnostic result is. So like this would be
Yeah.
kind of like before you would do like a full strategy session for like where do we want to go?
Yeah. And again, if it's a much bigger company, if there's a lot more at risk, a lot of times they have history, they've been in business. And so we need to talk about some of that stuff. Something's changed, whether it's leadership or perception or the market. And they have an inkling. And a lot of times this is to validate what they already know. Because, people on those leadership teams are oftentimes really smart, and they have a hunch as to what's happening, but they want a little more info on that, and they want to be able to present back to the team. And so when we sit in a room or on Zoom, that they're like, hey, like, look, these are our findings, and now we can build from here and know that we have a gap that we have to get across, that like, hey, we're being perceived completely different than we want to be.
How much do you think that like what I'm sure there's variety of range of price, especially based on the size of the company, but like for like a really big audit like that, where do you see those starting?
$20,000 up to like, 50 or 60. A lot of that variable cost though, like the one I'm thinking of that I did, it was really big, is I flew all over the country. I interviewed people, like that was time, like that was just
Yeah.
time of like buying me for days, like at a time, like travel, like compiling it, like it was just a lot of labor, and
Yeah.
so it can add up really, really quick if people want to run any sort of focus groups, if people want,
Yeah. Oh man, focus groups can be $40,000 just alone. I've looked into that before.
yeah,
Hiring
just
folks.
alone, or
Yeah.
like the same client, they wanted, they were really big on consensus all the time and involving the team. Well, that only wasn't my time, that was their time, and that was like, and so if you start looking at budget from that perspective, which clients don't always do, but it gets expensive. So I
Yeah.
think that like for this stuff, and this becomes again part of a much bigger engagement.
Yeah.
And it really is like, hey, we are going on maybe like a multi-year engagement and we're going to start. And, and for me, these have always been like at the corporate level,
Yeah.
bigger brands, like I would say
Yeah.
50 million and higher in revenue. And like big brands, right? It's like this
Yeah.
one. Yeah. The
So
one.
most businesses will probably fall in that medium range.
Yep. I
So
think
you said
most businesses are going to fall in the mild, because
they're
if it's
small.
a lead magnet and you want to get people coming through, they're small. I've also seen this done really well though, if you're actually on a sales call and you can say, great, like I've seen it done traditionally where you're someone sold me a free strategy session,
Mhm.
and part of it was like, hey, just sit here for 10 minutes and answer these questions. And then it wasn't a brand audit, it was a different kind of audit. And I answered them, and then we had a conversation, and they basically exposed and sat there and held it in my face that I had this problem, right? It was genius. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so brilliant. So that's one way you could use that as a sales tool. But yeah, I mean, I think this, like when I got your note about brand audits, this is really what I was thinking. I was thinking this medium one. I was thinking that
Yeah.
like, hey, it becomes this sales tool, a way to sell something. It's also a way to justify your thinking. So we talk about this all the time in all our strategic work. And I think sometimes for people to take that leap, especially if they haven't paid for it before, if they haven't done a lot of strategy before, to
Yeah.
take that leap and to pay for the thinking, this is just another way to show them what you can do and how you're thinking, and to build that rapport. And it's like a micro commitment compared to going down that rabbit hole of complete rebrand or refresh.
Yeah. So this is the one that you typically like to charge like 1,600 for.
Yeah, again,
Okay. Okay.
retail. If you're watching this on YouTube, that's, yes, I charge that all the time. But yeah, and more important, and more important is to get the right client in, to show that we can help them out and get them there. But like an audit, like I never want, like you really, for me, need to toe that line between showing them and helping them and giving them value, but like not trying to solve everything. Because you don't want to solve everything for them, because you typically can't in an audit. I mean, that's a huge scope of work. And then
Yes.
B, you don't want to, you just want to make sure that you leave room to, that you can get them solve that problem. Lastly, I do always want to give them enough information that they can go do things on their own, they can implement. If we're not a good fit, it's very important to me that this audit has value to it. But it's hard, like, because, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever run into this, but this is a huge issue for me. It's like I kind of know all the tools we have at our disposal, and I feel
Mhm.
sometimes like bad that I'm not like taking someone down that full exposure. But not everybody needs that either, And
Yeah.
so
Not everyone's ready for it. And I think another thing, a couple of friends have sent me a video of a psychologist talking about value-based pricing from a customer standpoint, which I will send it to you. It's like 4 minutes. It's great, but she talks about the pain point, and like, yes, we talk about pain point all the time, but is the pain big enough that they're ready to buy and they're ready to spend that much money? Like a lot of times I think, especially as creatives or designers, we see the immediate problem, but for them, it's not a pain point. So it's not their priority. So I think we just need to find the right clients who have too much pain that they can't
mhm.
handle it.
Well, and a lot of times this like medium sort of diagnostic can also become this great conversation piece to show them that pain and to connect to that they're feeling, but
Yeah.
they make a brand problem. So you come back and you say, hey, look, I've been looking at your website and I'm seeing this. You're kind of all over the place. You're showing up kind of schizophrenic. Do you feel schizophrenic? Well, that's a brand problem if you don't, have these foundational attributes figured out and articulated. And so it does become this great way to have a less threatening conversation and really agree upon what the problem is, and that there is a problem, much to your point.
Yeah.
Like if they don't have a
Yeah.
problem, then it's not. And I start this isn't about sales, but I start every sales call with like, why are we talking? Right? Like why, like you're busy, I'm busy. Like, why
Yeah.
did you book this call? Like, why did you find, like, why was this important to you to take time out of your day? Because obviously it was important to you. And then they'll start talking, and hopefully
Yeah.
they're able to articulate it. If not, we go through that process and help them out.
Yeah.
Let me see if I have.
That's great. I've also thought a lot about, because I actually come from the traditional communication journalism world and self-taught in this design and like learning brand strategy and everything. So I think a lot about how is the written communication brand audit different from like a design one. And I think that your 7-point audit is really interesting because you have like different versions of it. And I think that looks at some of the messaging more in depth versus like the design. So I think that's cool to have a couple different variations of it as much as you tinker around.
Yeah, and this is a good example. This isn't like my brand map. I'm borrowing it from a friend, but the idea is the same, and the things that we do, and so thinking about like this would be another way just to like think of an audit, like at a really high level, like who are your competitors, do you have brand attributes, who's your target market, are you clear on that? Um, do you have a positioning statement? What is it, and is it, so these would be other ways that you could also just use this as these are your headings, maybe one slide per, just to say, hey, this is what I'm seeing, and then these are the things that, and as looks all simple here in a brand map, but these all funnel into much bigger scopes of
Oh,
work and things like that. And so that's another way that I would think of it, just like what's your output, right?
yeah,
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
that being said, any other questions around audits and how I might be able to help you?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like you hit everything that I'm really looking for, because I'm just in the kind of that beginning stages. I had developed like a lead magnet type thing, but then just never finished it or fully designed it to make it look pretty. And um, but yeah, that's really helpful, and sharing your pricing is like motivating for me. Um,
I
yeah.
think you could charge more, I mean, I just put it there because I look at it as always the first step. I'm not really in the business of selling brand audits as a standalone. I mean, we'll do it and happy to help. But the idea is that it'll lead to additional engagement
Right.
and help out.
Do a full strategy and
Yeah, I mean
hopefully refresh.
that's the business we're in. We believe in it.
Yeah.
But like as I mentioned, it's not always that's not every. So someone asked me this the other day. I firmly believe every brand needs branding, but not every brand needs to go through brand strategy at any given time. If I'm saying that correctly, meaning that sometimes for a small business, you just got to stay in business. You just got to like go
Yeah.
sell something and prove it. And yes, having some of
Yeah.
this is really good,
Yeah.
but
It's
like
too in depth for a lot of small businesses. And like that's actually something that we've talked about through the system with Jose Caballero, who created Core. Like he said, it works for an individual. Like the framework and everything is very transferable in many different ways. But for the needs and the pragmatism of small business owners, it's probably not, they won't see the value as much as a larger or medium sized brand would.
yeah,
So I thought that was interesting. He said that.
cool.
Yeah. That was really helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. If you have any other questions, just let me know. But yeah, I mean, like part of it, like I think we're apt to do is you're probably overthinking it a little bit, and
Duh.
yeah, and remember, most people aren't really looking at everything like this, and and I guess lastly, like clients sometimes just want validation that they are thinking about this in the right way. And you say, hey, yeah, I mean, you have some problems and we can help you fix that. And I think that it's something I've always struggled with because I'm a word person. I'm a writer. Like I'm a thinker. I'm not a designer.
Yeah.
And I know designers have their own challenges to just being thought of as designers, but um, is connecting this like cool output to the thinking. And this helps do that a little bit. It shows like, hey, here's the outputs that um, are in your world and affecting your business through the strategic thinking. And that helps to kind of close that gap too. So I'm not getting all like ethereal or
Yeah.
hypothetical or dreamy or woo-woo-y or anything like that.
Yeah, it's very like foundational, realistic, understandable. just like, I was talking about developing leads with some people and using some of these type of strategy framework to, gather the interest or build trust with someone who's a little hesitant or maybe doesn't see the value of a full brand strategy session. And one of the advice that my mentor gave me was, doing some sort of goal setting related around revenue, because everyone understands money. They have to make money. Or working on like one customer profile, like just giving them a little bit of a taste of it, so they can see the value of it and get in that right frame of thinking.
Totally. Well, that's Brand Audits. I hope you learned something new and found that to be helpful. If you liked the video, please go ahead and like it below. And if you really want to learn more about branding and our point of view, go ahead and subscribe here on YouTube. If you want more information on this or another video addressing brand audits, go ahead and comment below. Let us know. And thank you so much for taking the time to learn a little bit about brand audits. Brand audit. In a brand audit. You take 2, 3.